That's not what I want.
Oh. Minimize that.
I was told to exit out. Chair Georgia, we are now live on YouTube.
Oh, thank you very much. All right. It's 7:03 p.m. This is March 17th, 2021. I'm going to call the this meeting of the Transportation and Circulation Commission to order. And I'm going to call out people's names. Please respond with your full name. That's how we'll do roll call. So Greg, say Greg Brown, and then here.
Greg Brown, present.
All right, Dick.
Dick Craig, present.
Lynn.
Lynn Hedane, present.
Vianney.
Vianney Serrière, present.
Gail.
Gail Taylor, present.
And Stella.
Stella Weatherspoon, present.
Thank you. I'm Carl DiGiorgio, acting chair tonight. We also have Mike Moran and Therese assisting us, staff members, and we have a guest. Thank you very much for coming, John Cicciarelli, I believe. And
Yes.
I'm very glad you're here. So anybody move to adopt the agenda or any changes that they'd like to see happen?
I so move.
I'll
Second.
second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. So let's take this opportunity to open up this meeting to public comments on items that are not on the agenda. Is anybody that wants to make a comment, then hit the raise your hand button. Oh, let the record show also Sia is also here. Thank you.
Yes.
Any hands? So,
Tell who Sia is.
Sia is our, well, why don't you describe your position as a transportation engineer? You mute?
And here,
He's on mute, I think.
unmute.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
There we go.
Hi,
okay.
I'm the new traffic engineer with the city of Lafayette.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I don't see any public comments. So let's move on to, I guess, new business. We do have, we have Mayor Candell sitting in with us. Do you have any comments or you want to hold it for later? Okay. All right. And let's go into new business. And Mike and Sia, I don't know how this is a really big report. And I don't know how you want to introduce this report. Do you want to try and frame it up for us?
Sure. You guys have been waiting for this report, I know, and so has a lot of your public patiently. It's just been one of those pandemic years where things are not coming together as fast as possible, but there's still been a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of work going on, and we're getting back to you now. And you've all seen the report. You saw a draft of it earlier. This is essentially the same report. It's just been adopted as a final report. And now it is on our website and published out there for the public to view. So the complete street safety assessment. And it looks at safety improvements throughout the city that could apply to pretty much anywhere. But it also took a closer look at three areas of Lafayette: the Pleasant Hill Road corridor, particularly near Spring Hill and Acalanes High School, and the Morocco Road corridor, particularly around the junior high school and Lafayette Elementary, and the Burton Valley Elementary area. So it's got specific recommendations for those three areas. I'm very pleased that we have John Cicciarelli. And John, if I mispronounced your name, please correct it for me. Okay, getting a thumbs up, that's good. With us this evening, he is one of the primary authors and did the field work. He's a bicycle expert and a bike ped specialist, so to speak. He's worked on a lot of these safety assessments and this type of work. So as an outsider, he can come in and just independently look at what's going on in our city and what he's seen and make recommendations. So he didn't have to do this, but I asked if he would come in and just kind of talk us through the report, maybe the procedures, and take questions from commissioners and even the public regarding the report. I think it'll be very helpful to hear from his perspective. He really cares that we implement as much of this as we can, right? He doesn't want it to just be a report on a shelf somewhere. His intent is, and also Afsani, I should say, who was also an author and an overviewer of the entire report. Their intent is that we apply this to our streets and make things safer. So, and I know, of course, that's the intent of this entire commission. So I think with that, I'll just turn it over to John and see what he'd like to take you through. And I know that we'll have a time, you've had time to view it. And, if you've got any questions or clarifications, this would be a great time to ask those. And then as far as following this, this leads right into the Burton Valley pilot study that's kind of been on hold for a little bit, right? Because several of the applications in here and recommendations can be put directly into that pilot study. And that doesn't mean they can't be put into pilot studies elsewhere in the city. That's just the one that's been queued up and that we have specific funding for. So I think that is the first next step, so to speak, as far as application. But I'm sure that we'll get requests for some of these types of elements added citywide. So without further ado, John. Carl, you have a question though.
I'd like to make a point first. Thank you, John, so much for this report, and we really appreciate you being here. During this, because the report was distributed on email as a PDF, I'd encourage all of the commissioners to refer to the page numbers that are on the report, and that's when it's been printed out. In other words, if it has a page 3 at the bottom, then please refer to that page number when you're making questions or comments. Okay. We'll let John go, and then I have some general questions. I thought what we could do is let John explain what he wants to highlight. Then we'll go into some general questions, then we can move on to specific questions after that. All right. So thank you, John.
Great. Sound check first. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. It took me a while to be able to hear myself. I had to open some dialogue anyhow. I'm going to share my screen and go to the table of contents of the report to orient people and tell you what it is and what it wasn't, what it isn't, and how it came to be in the program background. So I'm going to share a screen. And so there, I am not seeing what I expect to see there. What are you seeing? Are you seeing?
We're seeing your file structure.
Your desktop.
Okay, all right, I'm going to switch monitors here. Hang on. There we go. That's what I want.
I'm not seeing.
Okay, so should it take
John, I think you want to. There you go.
You got it. Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Not the world's most experienced Zoom presenter quite yet. The report is from a program at UC Berkeley called SafeTrack, and SafeTrack follows on earlier programs that I've been involved with since 1999. I was at Stanford University as the bicycle program coordinator, the first full-timer, and got invited to be on a panel by Ted Cheval, who used to run the tech transfer program at Berkeley. And after the panel, he asked if I wanted to be considered to be a statewide safety evaluator, and I did. So after Stanford, this is one of the things I've been doing for 20 odd years. The programs are free technical assistance to local cities and jurisdictions. And lately, they've added tribal programs as well. So last year I did 6 CSSA reports and 6 tribal reports through UC Berkeley. My program manager is Afsani Yavari at SafeTrack, and David Ragland is our principal investigator, head guy. It's in the School of Public Health. What these are a combination of homework, if you will, evaluation of statistics of the city, in relation to other citizens population group. General observations as to the city's progress in terms of policies and procedures. That's chapter 3, called the benchmarking analysis. And a field chapter, which is what I usually do for the program. So the field chapter is a one-day on-site program, although I usually arrive a day early and do some pre-work to familiarize myself with what I thought I saw on Google. And then we go off and write a report based on it. So the scope is limited to what we can reasonably research in advance and cover on foot and on bicycle and driving around, walking on the field day. I was lucky enough to have Mike Moran available that afternoon. And we had agreed in advance, Mike and I and Afsani, that there would be 3 focal areas. And based on what Lafayette needed at the point of 2020, they were all related to schools. There had been a fatality at Burton. Not sure any of our suggestions could have prevented that tragedy, but that was high on the consciousness of the city of Lafayette at the time. The other 2 focal areas were downtown Lafayette Elementary School and Stanley Middle School on School Street, and then the northeastern area of the city, Spring Hill and Acalanes on the big road up there, whose name slips my mind at that point. So I looked at those areas in advance, of course, and got to know some of the unique qualities of the streets, including, well, in Burton Valley's case, the streets don't have sidewalks, but everybody walks in the street. It's just, I've seen this in Lafayette, I've seen this in Los Altos and many other cities. That's just the way the streets evolved. So, so we look at the city's existing conditions and hear from the city representative, in this case, Mike, what the concerns are. We look at crash history. And we have also seen similar cities in similar situations throughout California. I probably have done over 100 cities at this point, you know, anywhere from 3 to 7 a year. So we try and bring in things that we've seen elsewhere that the city might not have been aware of, and also just put on our thinking caps and apply traffic engineering, bicycle pedestrian design thinking, state of the practice, and see if we can come up with something innovative to solve problems and set you on good stead. In the case of Lafayette Elementary School, you've got a well-used residential street, residential arterial street, pumping a lot of traffic through to downtown to the highway, Highway 24, to and from homes. And you have a neighborhood nearby with people doing pickup and drop off, especially near the middle school. With Spring Hill and Acalanes, you also have a school a little further from the center of town with a lot of pickup and drop off, no doubt, but a walking route along a 2-lane, essentially rural road, or what used to be a rural road. And to the city's credit, it has improved Spring Hill Road considerably for walking. Acalanes High School draws from a much broader area, and yet it's very difficult to reach Acalanes High School from south of Highway 24. So that was one of the things that stood out there. Burton Valley, as I mentioned, the streets don't have sidewalks, but a lot of kids walk and bike to school, or want to walk and bike to school. The school has 3 main entrances, 2 of which are also accessible by cars, and one is a path off of one of the side streets. So I guess I would be glad to answer any questions or let your questions drive my presentation rather than going through the whole report. What do I do actually? I'm going to go down to Burton and show you the structure of the chapter so that you can see how we organize it. So I'm going to dive ahead a little bit here, get the zoom in out of the way. There you go. Okay, I'm going to go to 2-page mode here. Can everybody still see okay?
If you can zoom in a little, if
I'll
that's
go back to 1 page.
some people in the audience may not be on a large monitor.
Okay, so this is the focal area section for Burton Valley Elementary. Begins with a location map. I mean, you know where the school is, but another reader not familiar with the issues and opportunities may need orientation. So we begin with existing conditions summary, which in this case locates the school in its capture area, the attendance boundary, and then points out the 3 entrances to the school. There's the Roar Drive entrances and exits, the Marywood 2-way driveway, which is a steep hill, and a path coming in from Sandalwood Court. So we cover existing conditions. In this case, I broke out existing conditions into the 3 separate areas. So this, for example, is Marywood Drive. This is a Google aerial, of course, and I've drawn in some things to make it clear, like signs, stop signs, enhanced crosswalk markings, etc. So existing conditions, and then observations. Some of these observations were done in the field on the day. Some of these were photos that might have already existed, for example, on Google. This was actually in real time as I was walking out there. Of course, this is pandemic conditions, so I have no idea how this looks on a typical non-pandemic day, but I get an idea how it works because it's got a shoulder. That's where people walk. That's where people bike. Because of origins and destinations, not everybody bikes on the same direction side of the street. Because there's no dedicated bikeway, some people, young people on bikes, have been trained by their parents very well to not dart out into traffic and instead to walk bikes around parked cars. That happened to be my rental car. So I got to see how it happens in real time. Lots of activity here, evident demand for improved conditions for bicycling and walking. This picture on the lower right is actually from Google. You can tell by the automatically blurred images of faces. So after setting out kind of an inventory of conditions, we started into observations for improving conditions. And this is based on just best practices in the field and also what's possible given the dimensions. This street has a certain lane width and a certain shoulder width and a certain curb to curb width that are your starting point for consideration of any sort of potential improvements. I also have to say that because although I have lots of experience throughout California doing this sort of work and have kept up with the field, I don't know Lafayette nearly as well as any of you do. So the report and I will call our findings suggestions rather than recommendations. They are definitely things that need to be further filtered by your commission and others in Lafayette rather than taken as gospel. So that said, we start to brainstorm. So this is the existing 2-way configuration. This is using a web-based tool called Street Mix that lets you basically visually design street cross sections. So this is what existing. We've got 8-foot shoulders and 10-foot traffic lanes, a 2-way street. Well, let's see. How could you fit in bike lanes if that was what you wanted to do? Well, you could go down to 1 traffic lane, make it a 1-way street. What would that mean for emergency vehicles? Well, they're wider, yet they could function with cars pulled over as they do for emergency vehicles. So we start to play with concepts. I'm using Street Mix here to convince myself that it will or won't work. So a 1-way drive concept was one of the things that occurred to me, and I'm sure it's occurred to the city as well. May or may not be technically feasible, may or may not be politically feasible. We try not to censor ourselves by shying away from things that may require some public process, to say the least, because they would amount to a big change in how the neighborhood circulation works. Among those things is what becomes possible if you consider parking removal. In the particular case of Marywood, I'm going to roll back to the starting figure. In the particular case of Marywood, the school is up the hill here off the top of the diagram. 2 blocks to the north along Marywood, off the right side of the figure, is a access point for an access to the regional trail system. So that is something that's highly valued by the residents of this neighborhood. And in fact, could be a way to get to school for more students than can reasonably walk along the streets. So the idea of transforming Marywood was interesting from that perspective. People already walk and bicycle to and from that trail access point and other streets and houses in the neighborhood. If you look at the aerial, you see that trail access is on the west side of the street, which is the upper side of the street in this diagram. So if consideration were given to somehow adding a walking and or bicycling facility along the west side of the street, the upper side of the street in the diagram, that could directly connect to the trail access point 2 blocks to the east down at Sandalwood. So that was definitely on our minds. So rolling back to possibilities, we came up with a list of suggestions. So the suggestions are by location and by item within location and suggestions within that. So the one that appeals to me, but I don't live in the neighborhood, would be to consider parking removal on the west side. We looked at the parking occupancy, not in a scientific way, but just observational that day. And also Mike related his observations about the general level of parking utilization during the day and at morning and evening times. And it seems at least worth considering with the neighborhood, the notion of parking removal on the west side. So people would park in their own driveways or across the street. What you get then is the use of that 8-foot shoulder on the north side for kind of a shared use path. It would not have heavy duty separation from vehicular traffic, but the traffic's moving at moderate speeds there. So it seems like that could work. It would be a 2-way facility. That's just what paths are for walkers. You can try to make them 1-way for bikes, but given the connectivity with the streets and the school and the trail, it would operate as 2-way. So something for consideration. This is a diagram on the Ruhr Drive side. Minor suggestions here for improving the crossability of the street at the 2-way driveway. This is suggestions for a mid-block crosswalk. Crosswalks are either at intersections or they're between intersections. This would probably be considered an intersection crosswalk with respect to the driveway, but from the standpoint of Morocco Road, it's actually offset. So it would be treated in the manual as a mid-block crosswalk. The improvements are fairly straightforward. It's high visibility markings, advanced yield lines so that motorists are cued to stop before they actually block the visibility of the crosswalk. Enhanced signage, these are school pentagon signs, and the standard downward pointing arrow to locate the sign visually to approaching drivers. There's a bus stop here, but the crosswalk will still work with the bus stop. And then a sidewalk exists all the way down to Marywood. So if something was done on Marywood for walking, this would kind of tie into it. So these are, so each of the 3 entrances for the school have a table of suggestions. And then this is Sandalwood Court, existing, well-designed, well-located crosswalk at the crest of Sandalwood with a couple of potential improvements, such as yield lines, removal, replacement of the bollards, making the path entrance a little bit more visible. I think I'm going to stop and take questions to drive the discussion rather than continuing to talk, especially since we're half an hour in. I'll turn it over to anyone that wants to talk.
And let me start, if you don't mind. I want to ask some general questions. And for those that are following along, I noticed the page numbers on your display on your screen is different, slightly different than what I had in my printouts. So I don't know, just.
I have a draft that probably slightly precedes the one that Afsani distributed, so I don't
Yes,
have
okay.
the final PDF.
That's fine. So what we'll do is we'll try and we'll figure it out how to ask questions. But first, I wanted to ask in the beginning of the report, there was in section 3. This is the table 3-1. I just had a question about some of the terms. There was a term under general plan densities and mixed use zones, something labeled CBD.
Central Business District.
Okay.
And this screen that I have displayed right now clearly indicates that I do not have the report that you have, because all I've got is a placeholder for for section 3.
That's all right. I'm sure you know the material.
If a particular question has to do with what's on the page that you are seeing, someone else could put that up, and we could refer to that rather than me sharing a screen.
That's right. These first initial questions are really kind of general, so that's fine. There was discussion about in one section labeled bicycling supportive amenities and wayfinding. And I wondered if you could spend a minute and kind of describe the concept of wayfinding. That was kind of new to me, and I don't know if others understand that, but
sure.
It's wayfinding.
I actually can call up an METCD figure that will be useful in this regard. So give me just a second to get that open. So I'm opening the California METCD, which is the manual that traffic engineers and planners use to see what should be done with signs, signals, markings, railroad crossings, anything that controls traffic. So it has.
John, excuse me. What we see on the screen is your section 3 of your report. We don't see the new file that you opened up.
Okay, sharing now.
Okay, thank you.
So part 9 of the METCD calls parts what we would otherwise call chapters. So part 9 is all about bicycle facilities. So I'm going to spin ahead to the signs subsection of that, specifically to guide signs. Here we go. So in 2003, the METCD at the national level was enhanced with signs that were derived from highway guide signs. Oh, let me back up and say that in the United States, guided signs have a green background and white text. So we're very familiar with these signs in the highway context. All that was done in the bicycle context in the 2003 timeframe when I was on the national committee was we shamelessly stole the Netherlands signage and recolored it for US practice. So we now have what sign wonks called D1 series signs for bicycles as well. The way you can think about wayfinding signage is you want to have the traveler have advance notice of a decision point before they get to the decision point, so they don't have to make abrupt, confused movements. And also after they've made their decision and either continued straight or turned and continued on a, say, a side street or a branch path, you want to confirm that they've made the correct decision, that they're still on the way to the destination they desire. So a key distinction between signs is it a advanced sign, or is in other words, a decision point sign, or is it a confirmation sign? These signs that we see here are advanced signs. So they would be posted some distance before the decision point, whether that's a street intersection or a path intersection, to let the bicyclist, in this case, in the upper series of signs, know that there's a bicycle destination that may require a turn. The D series signs have 1, 2, and 3 destinations available. The arrow is mandatory. The bicycle is mandatory if it's a bicycle sign. And optionally, you can have a distance. And some cities are doing a non-standard thing, which is a travel time as well. So basically, this is a way of bringing bicycle users up to a kind of level playing field with roadway users for destinations that may not be significant or advisable for driving a car. So for example, if you have a backstreet route through a neighborhood that gets you to a useful destination really directly, you may want to consider bicycle guide signage. These signs can also be smaller than a highway size sign so that they make sense at bicycle speeds but aren't distracting or really perceived by motorists very much. So this is the standard US bicycle guide signage.
Thank you. Thank you. That makes sense.
The METCD sets down, I consider, pretty strict rules for what you can and can't use as far as colors and logos and things like that. But for guide signs, where it's not really safety related, it's information related, a lot of cities go beyond and put logos at the top of the sign. For example, Berkeley uses a non-standard color, purple, for its bicycle boulevards, which are its key backstreet bicycle routes. And they put a distinctive Berkeley logo at the top. So this is the idea of guide signage.
Great. There was another section, pages later, that was just, it was titled Traffic Signal and Stop Sign Warrants.
Yes.
I'm not clear on what warrants, what that means.
A warrant, in colloquial terms, is like a warrant for arrest. It's sufficient conditions. In the traffic engineering world, it's a set of conditions that either must or should be satisfied before you can apply a device. This is what hopefully prevents, for example, stop sign proliferation. You know, it's routine for, I'm sure, in front of your commission, for people to come up and say, we need a stop sign at my intersection. And you'll say, okay, we'll consider that. But when you hand that off to the traffic engineer, they'll say, well, let's look in the METCD and see what the warrant conditions are for stop signs. So basically, it's a set of conditions that either allow or disallow consideration. They are for stop signs and traffic signals, and also signal-like devices, such as pedestrian hydrant beacons, which are kind of like firehouse signals for pedestrian crosswalks. That's what a warrant is in traffic engineering.
Great. I think at this point, if everybody's okay with it, let's open up questions from the commissioners to John. Let's see if I can. Lynn, did you want to start off?
Okay, yeah. First of all, thank you for that report. I was fascinated. I've read a ton of reports in my terms on the commission, and I very much enjoyed that. There were parts that I thought were maybe beyond us. Going over to Morocco Road, you had recommended, we did have bike lanes, by the way, on Morocco Road. That was our first. I was part of that, Von Wilson and I. That was quite a feat to get a bike lane such as that at that time. It was taken away in order to make room for the additional traffic. And we had a choice of leaving it there as crowded as it was, or maybe widening the travel lanes and taking it up to the curb, taking the traffic up to the curb edge. We decided not to do that. We decided it was more comfortable for the pedestrians on the east side of the street to have a little space between themselves and the cars. And so we have the configuration that we have right now. I noticed that you had in mind a vehicle travel lane in each direction, and possibly removing one travel lane and, turning it into bike lanes. And I was wondering, did you have in mind also, parking on the west side of the street? And how did you plan on handling all of the northbound traffic? The southbound traffic doesn't come quite as heavily. It sort of divides itself during the day and the coming home times, so that there are not so many oceans of cars as there are during the northbound traffic hours. But how do you plan on accommodating all that traffic with just one lane northbound?
I have to say that we did not conduct a traffic analysis, and it's well beyond the scope of what we can do with our limited time on the report. What we did was just a simple dimensional analysis. We said, given the existing street width without widening, what's dimensionally possible? This is the concept in case of Moraga, excuse me, is a classic. I'm going to have to get a glass of water right back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So this existing conditions on Moraga Boulevard in the focal area number 1 by the elementary school is a 4-lane street with parking on one side.
Just a second. Let's clarify. So
That's Morocco Road.
Morocco Road, which runs basically north-south.
Yes,
There's a Morocco Boulevard that runs basically east-west.
correct.
So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
I think I may have mislabeled it.
Yeah, this is Morocco Road we're looking at. This is Morocco Road, not Morocco Boulevard. So
Yes.
this is the north-south,
Right.
the main road, from Morocco
Four lanes.
headed up towards the Mount Diablo and the shopping center and the freeway.
Right. So the segment's identified correctly, but the road itself is mislabeled. My mistake. It's currently 4 lanes, and this is a one concept for what's called a 4 to 3 lane reduction. You can't just willy-nilly do this. You would have to see, like you said, how will traffic queue. It's a complicated question, but it's not all that hard to solve. It just requires analyzing the traffic signal operations, analyzing how traffic queues back from the more major signal in the heart of downtown. It's not a concept that could be applied in isolation at any of the intersections or the short blocks. It would have to be, and I'm sure the city has considered it as a corridor. To make something like this work, where traffic is congested, especially in the morning, would require thinking of the corridor as a whole and looking at the interactions between the various signals. That said, one thing that a 4 to 3 road diet does, or lane reduction does, is it makes it possible for left turners to have their own service. So I have no idea whether this could be made to work in practice, but to the extent that left turns impede the operation of the inner driving lanes, the conversion from 4 to 3 gives you a way to serve those left turners directly. And so the remaining driving lanes are more clearly dedicated to through traffic. In the case of the school, you have people turning in southbound in the morning into the school driveway. So that would be one instance where a dedicated center left turn lane, at least for a segment of the street, might prove useful. But top level, we did not conduct a traffic analysis to determine practicality. We only wanted to offer a one-dimensional possibility.
Lynn, did you have additional? Do you want to clarify any questions that you had posited? A few of them.
Well, yeah. For one thing, we did hire a consultant also to talk about a turning lane in there, and they figured that the transition, that there wasn't enough space, enough length to get a turning lane in there. But we've up until about, I don't think, I guess I'd have to ask Mike Moran, we were getting up until about, say about 5 years ago, we were getting 25,000 cars through that intersection. And that's a lot of cars coming through, most of them in the morning, more than in the morning than at any other time of the day. So I don't know if that would work. If we could nail some of that down, it would be wonderful, because if there were a chance that we could make some of that succeed, it would be a fine thing. I just think that it probably we can't, I'm guessing.
It may well turn out after analysis that you can't do that. Traffic conditions have changed a little bit during the current pandemic. It's anybody's guess as to how that will play out once we're all vaccinated, given that workplace commuting patterns have changed and some companies are rethinking the notion of centralized work. So it's really anybody's guess. I do think and I'm not a professional engineer or PE or TE. I'm more of a planner and conceptual designer. It seems to me though that really thinking hard about how to get traffic through the main intersection would be key to having any chance to making it work further down the street at the school and down to School Street.
Oh, I have another. Can I do?
Sure.
May I ask another one?
Sure.
On School Street, there was the recommendation to remove parking on the north side of School Street on the approach to the Lafayette Moraga Trail. And I liked very much
Lynn,
the idea of transitioning, huh?
do you have a page number of the?
It's in the 50s, just a second.
Okay. Okay.
You have it there. Oh, right there. Stop. And then up, there are a bunch of houses up in here with parking. And I believe that you had made the recommendation to remove the parking and install a bike lane. I mean, a bike pathway.
Again, these are suggestions.
Yes.
They're all trade-offs. If you could remove parking and nobody would object, it's a slam dunk to get a trail on the north side. But that's of course contentious. One thing that a one-day observation of the site did not reveal, especially during pandemic conditions, is how the street actually behaves during a real non-pandemic school pickup and drop-off day, including what kids are doing on bikes and on foot. I had to exercise a lot of imagination, and Mike Moran helped a lot. Also input from Megan Mittman, who lives in the Burton Valley area. She's with Farron Piers and is a nationwide pedestrian and traffic expert. So got some good input from her on that. A lot depends on what's politically feasible here. It's a challenge. People like having the ability to park their cars in front. I'm no different. We live in San Francisco, my wife and I, and there are times when I can walk 2 blocks to the truck and it's no problem. But there are times when I really would like to have it parked in front so I can load something. So all of these technical suggestions, which is what they are, will depend on whether it can fly in the community. That said, though, as an analyst, what I look at, and I say, you've got a trail junction on the north side. You've got the wonderful school First Street path once you get over to that street that goes 3 blocks towards downtown. In between, the obvious place for any connection, should it be politically feasible, is on the north side of School Street. So what could be done technically to make that possible?
We have, I don't think we've ever had an accident on School Street. I like this configuration over here. I will tell you that the Topper Lane people very much wanted that blocked off totally. So, and have no through traffic through there. And they would have preferred to have a roundabout. It's what they wanted so that cars would come in and go out. That might not be possible, but.
You mean like a turnaround, like a cul-de-sac?
Right. But I like this this approach. This is very nice. The problem over here where these cars are, I don't know where the houses are right at the moment. I can't see them, but I think their roofs are back over here.
Let's actually scroll down to Topper. This is Topper.
No,
So it's-
well, I wasn't thinking Topper at the moment. I was thinking School Street, but those lots are very shallow from the front door to School Street to the curb. And that's
right.
the only place they have to park. And if we put a trail in there, do you have a place that where they could park?
That's right. Let me back out of that view here. Hold on. When I look at what's possible on the street, I look at the curb to curb width, and I look at the existing sidewalk. And one of the things that you have to allow yourself to think about is, does the center line need to stay in that place? For example, if you modify parking on one side of the street, then one element of the street transformation can be moving the center line. I don't have an answer for you, but I want to encourage you to think flexibly about the presence or absence of parking, of travel lanes, directionality of traffic lanes. All together, though, think about what people are trying to do here. What are the desire lines for people walking? Well, some people desire to come to the trail and walk across the street and go to middle school. Some people desire to walk along the street to the trail or to their neighbor's house down on Topper. So we look at what's there and what's missing. What's there in the case of the Bend here is an extra wide street with no reason to park on this side. So that gives me raw material to consider something like this little bike left turn pocket. These are kind of serving suggestions, if you will, that you would see on a food at the grocery store.
Lynn, if I can interrupt for a second, I apologize to John that we didn't really frame up something that the Transportation Commission is really moving towards, and that is, and Susan Kendall's here tonight, who's our mayor. What we're going to be doing is taking this report and other reports, and we're going to be organizing teams to go and look at what types of quick strikes and other improvements can be implemented to improve the safety around, particularly around schools and for children. And so this is a great report, has a lot of meat in it. But what's going to happen is we're gonna break this report up into teams and kind of go through it, and then we are going to eventually go on field audits, or actually walks, I should call it that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. One problem, and I hope you include the PTAs in this when you do it, because they know the neighborhood. You live over in Release Valley and you're not anywhere near this neighborhood. They live with it every single day. That's very different, and we got to have their involvement. One problem that they are having that's driving them crazy is truck traffic cutting through and avoiding the turn at St. Mary's Road and cutting through here and then coming out on Topper, or however else they can get out. I suppose they're taking Avalon too, but they probably don't like the speed humps, one of our first sets of speed humps. We've put up signs, as I recall, no truck traffic, but they don't pay any attention. Do you have any way of keeping trucks? Is there any addition that we can make that they wouldn't like, that we can keep them out?
Just off the top of my head, it depends on the kind of truck that you're trying to prohibit. If it's just a big F-350 pickup, it kind of behaves like a regular car in terms of the turns it's able to make. But if it's a really big truck, you can make it very awkward to turn. That's one possibility.
A lot of them are box trucks, but some of them that I've seen are huge. Neighbors have sat out sometimes and tallied what they're offering up.
Right. The other thing about trucks is that occasionally you do want to let big trucks in there, such as moving vans when somebody moves or a large delivery. I don't have a ready answer for you.
No, these are
It's-
just,
it's-
these are cut through.
Right.
The neighbors attract them.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to respond to your mention of Avalon and Topper, though. Instead of thinking of School Street in isolation, the system formed by School and Avalon and Topper provides some interesting potential options in terms of directionality. I think if you scroll down a little bit further than the figure that I'm showing here, you'll see some really interesting possibilities for Topper that I think could dramatically improve the walkability and bikeability of Topper between, I guess it's St. Mary's at the south side and the middle school at the north side. So I was kind of excited about the potential there. Back to you.
All right. Actually, before I go to other commissioners for questions, I actually forgot to ask about some background. You had some pedestrian collision information in section 2.2, which on our handouts were on pages 5 and 6.
Yeah, again, that's in the section that Afsani writes in, and I don't have.
That's fine, but it's a general question. So
Yes.
I was going to ask, one of the graphs described pedestrian collisions by area. For example, whether they're in a crosswalk or not in a crosswalk. And I was surprised that the majority of the collisions with pedestrians were in crosswalks. And this is partly maybe a question for Mike and Sia, but I guess the question is, there was discussion in the report about using a ladder type crosswalks to improve contrast and visibility, if I read that correctly.
Yes.
My question for the staff is whether or not we have a policy of using ladder type crosswalks, and are there remnants of old diagonal crosswalks left in the city? I don't know if that's too new, Sia, for you, but I don't know if Mike doesn't have an answer on it, that's fine. But I'd like to follow up with that at some point.
What do you mean by diagonal?
Well, for example, on the graphic, you see the ladder style of crosswalks.
We use those, Carl. I mean,
Yeah.
we use those particularly near schools, particularly the yellow crosswalks, right? They'll be the ladder. They are higher visibility. There's just obviously a lot more surface area to them.
Right. Do we have a policy of using that style of crosswalk everywhere?
You know, the policy would probably be taken more from that MUTCD, just with their recommendations on when you would use this versus when you would use that. Certainly near schools where you have high pedestrian use, you want them as visible as possible.
This comes back to the 3 different types of crosswalks. At an intersection, a crosswalk can be on what's called a controlled approach. For example, an approach where vehicle traffic is going to come to a stop sign or to a traffic signal. That's called a controlled approach. Yeah. An uncontrolled approach, for example, at an intersection of 2 streets where one street doesn't stop, a crosswalk across that more major street that doesn't stop is called an uncontrolled approach. And then a crosswalk away from an intersection where it may be less expected that pedestrians would cross there unless some signs and marking are used to highlight the condition. That's called a mid-block crosswalk. So it's useful to think about tailoring your crosswalk marking and signage policy for whether it's an intersection crosswalk or not, whether it's a controlled approach, and whether it's a mid-block crosswalk. The other thing that's commonly used in deciding what the markings and signage are going to be is the volume of traffic and the number of lanes on the approach. There actually is very specific guidance based on comparison of thousands of intersections that has a wonderful table. Charles Sevier did the study 10 more years ago. Mike Moran probably knows about it. And it relates volume, speed, number of lanes, and the presence or absence of a raised median refuge, a place in the middle of the street that you can wait and cross halfway and dramatically simplify the crossing into 2 simpler single direction decisions. So I would recommend, I would suggest, well, so strong, I'd say recommend to look at the best practice crosswalk guidance and that particular reference table.
Could I ask a question of Mike Moran?
Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, Mike, the fatality that we had at this intersection here a few years ago, did the fellow who hit the victim, did he run the traffic light? How could he hit I don't understand how he can hit the victim. I've always wished that we had the bar before the crosswalk, which we don't have yet, and I hope someday we will. But how, unless he ran the light, how did he hit that person?
He didn't run the light, Lynn. He was making a left-hand turn off of Moraga Boulevard onto southbound Moraga Road, and he did not yield to the pedestrian already in the crosswalk. Correct. He was making that movement that's being shown, and he just didn't yield. He didn't see the person that he hit.
But that pedestrian, that pedestrian was crossing with the green light, and he turned into the pedestrian.
Correct.
Against
that pedestrian had.
So he turned when he shouldn't have, right?
No, they both had a green, but it's basically you have a green left yield to a pedestrian crossing, just like you would have a yield to a vehicle traveling straight through. The left turn has to yield to the straightaway.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, that was what was supposed to be a protected pedestrian in the crosswalk.
But if
with a ped crossing,
the pedestrian was crossing Moraga Road, yes?
Yes.
Or crossing Moraga Boulevard.
No, road.
the pedestrian was crossing Moraga Road.
Moraga Road, and he's coming from Moraga Boulevard.
No,
Crossing.
he was coming from the other side. He was coming from the Methodist church there.
Oh, yeah.
Got about to there. Yeah, got about a quarter way across there, and then had a vehicle turn left into them.
Okay.
Can I chime in? Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Vianney.
I really appreciate the delays that you have been putting, at least on Moraga Road and Mount Diablo. That makes a huge difference as far as safety is concerned when you're crossing.
Are you talking about the pedestrian signal coming on before the
yes, which is also on Moraga Boulevard and Moraga Road as well, unfortunately.
This is a technique called leading pedestrian interval, also known as pedestrian head start.
Oh, very good. It's so much safer, I have to say. Thank you very much. I wish it were on all of the lights in Lafayette.
All right, so let's go back to other commissioners have questions for John. So raise your hands, and if not, then I think we'll open it up to public comment. And then after that, I'd like to come back. I've got a kind of a list of questions still. So any other commissioner questions for John?
Okay. I have a question.
Yeah, Stella.
So my question is about page 65. It's the Spring Hill Elementary section of the report.
Yes.
And I saw you had a number of suggestions for the eastbound, southbound slip lane, crosswalk and warning sign, which is a fairly complicated area, the most complicated around that school. And I'm wondering, in your experience or opinion, would there be any advantage to having some kind of a rumble strip in advance of the crosswalk, say on Spring Hill Road in the eastbound direction?
So what you're trying to get there is yielding behavior, trying to get the motorist that's making the right turn to pay attention to the crosswalk, to notice it in advance, detect, recognize, and react, and hopefully for the pedestrian to have a fair chance of interacting with that motorist. This is a pretty standard geometry slip lane, and one concern is the crosswalk in the slip lane visible to approaching traffic, especially impatient drivers coming down from the residential area on Spring Hill. So the presence or absence of warning signage. For example, this school crosswalk sign here is posted well in advance of the crosswalk, perhaps in an effort to make it visible further upstream. But in doing so, it fails to indicate the exact location of the crosswalk. To the specific question about rumble strips, the slower you can make the interaction between a motorist and a pedestrian, the more chance the pedestrian has of surviving an impact. Rumble strip would certainly be one approach to do that. Another would be to raise the crosswalk, basically have the crosswalk be on top of what's called a speed table. So the crosswalk is flat, there's a ramp on either side. That way, someone who's driven through that slip lane at least once knows that there's a raised feature ahead, and they have no reason to speed into it because they know they're going to be disturbed vertically. So that's yet another approach, is a raised crosswalk. Boulder, Colorado actually uses raised crosswalks in slip lanes in much more major intersections than this. So it's certainly something that might be considered for this slip lane. The geometry of the slip lane itself is kind of old school. If you look at this from above, it neatly draws a quarter circle arc between the side street and the major street in a way that can be relatively sped through in a vehicle. Another possibility would be to remove the slip lane entirely, square up the right turn movement, and bring it to a more perpendicular condition at the major street, as is done in a more urban location. This is kind of historical geometry for an intersection like this. So depending on your budget and what works traffic operations wise with getting cars onto the major street, you shouldn't necessarily think of this existing curb line and island as a given. There are ways to shape the interaction between the pedestrian and the motorist. What squaring it up would do, so basically the right turner would be kept parallel with the street that they're approaching on until they get to the intersection itself. In the case of this intersection, that would require moving this traffic signal pole. We're talking big dollars. But what you get is a very slow right turn movement, which gives the motorist no incentive to speed through the movement. So there's a bunch of knobs you can turn as a designer to change the nature of the interaction. But if you're thinking of rumble strips and keeping the curbs where they are, why not think of a raised crosswalk as well?
I have a follow-up.
Thank you for that. I think the raised crosswalk had been mentioned in a previous report analysis from 2013, and I think the cost of it was pretty high. And so that's why I just wanted to ask about what in my mind might be a low budget interim approach. I
don't consider rumble strips to be very effective in slowing traffic, but if you were to put a speed hump upstream of the crosswalk, that could have a large part of the same effect as a raised crosswalk would have.
Okay. It's a little complicated area with the school's parking lot egress.
I'm talking about immediately upstream, for example, right here at the Gore.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
absolutely. I can see that. Okay, very good. Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate the analysis and the work that you've put into developing this report. It's so comprehensive, so thorough. I've learned a lot in reading it, and I know it's going to be a fantastic reference. And I really appreciate your keen eye, because in particular, I think it was on page 67, you made a recommendation for the R1-6 yield sign, which is on Spring Hill Road in the vicinity of this Spring Hill Elementary. And it's made a suggestion for what seems to be like really low-hanging fruit to create a forked painted line.
Yeah.
And
it's routinely used in San Francisco now and very effective. The other thing they do is, even if they can't put an island under the little sign, they put a painted island under the little sign.
Right. Just some paint. And I just really appreciate that that kind of a low-hanging fruit suggestion, because as you keenly noticed, it would, and recommended or noted, it would reduce the incidence of vehicles impacting the sign. I went out there and was pretty horrified at the condition of the sign, where it's clearly been hit so many times and righted many times.
They kind of resemble punching bags after a while.
Yes, exactly. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of your efforts on this.
I have to say that my SafeTrack assignments are really fun, because I get to put on my thinking cap and bring things that I've seen in other cities. I'm lucky to live in a very innovative city. It's highly urban, it's San Francisco, but all along the entire spectrum to the most rural cities in California and tribal areas, all the way up to downtown San Francisco, we get exposed to all sorts of tools which we can take and share with other communities.
I'd like to follow up. If you thank you, let me follow up on this slip lane, the figure 4.9. You mark. It talks about adding yield lines, that is shark's teeth. What is your assessment for the effectiveness of shark's teeth, and are there places where that shouldn't be used, or should it be used more generally?
In the case of this slip lane, as shown in the photo here, the traffic control condition on the approach is an expected yield. There are two yields, actually. The motorist should yield to any pedestrian in the crosswalk, and the motorist should also yield to traffic on the street they're merging into. So a yield line is used in advance of a crosswalk, typically with a multi-lane approach. Here, it would just be yet another marking to draw attention to the crosswalk ahead. It's especially important to put down yield lines when you have two or more approaching lanes. With a multi-lane approach, is what that's called, the problem is that you can have a attentive, courteous driver that stops close to the crosswalk. The pedestrian sees the driver stop and thinks, oh, they're good to go across two lanes. Then that stopped vehicle hides another vehicle whose driver does not see the pedestrian, does not understand the situation, and proceeds at full speed, and the pedestrian is struck in the next lane. That's called the multiple threat condition. It happens anywhere you have two approach lanes where one vehicle can hide an approaching second vehicle. So what you want to do in a multi-lane approach situation is you don't want the motorists to yield at the crosswalk. You want them to yield before the crosswalk, because that opens up sight lines. It makes it more likely that the pedestrian, before they start across, will be able to see an approaching vehicle in the second or third lane. So the yield lines function in a multi-lane approach situation is to encourage motorists to stop, to yield 1 or 2 car lengths upstream. There's an accompanying sign called the R1-5. You may have seen it. It's a regulatory sign that says yield here to pedestrians in crosswalk. So the coupling of the yield shark's teeth and the yield here sign are essential on an uncontrolled approach to a multi-lane crosswalk. Here in a single lane slip lane with a yield control approach, the yield line is less essential. It's just another tool in the toolbox to raise the visibility and make it likely that someone, especially unfamiliar with the area, will say, oh, there's a crosswalk ahead in the slip lane. I wouldn't have expected that otherwise.
I just want to mention, or maybe thank Mike Moran, because I did go out there recently and I have my photo of that intersection, and there is a yield marking and the shark's teeth. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. All right, other questions?
I have a question, Carl.
Oh, Susan?
Hi, hey, so thank you so much. In the Burton Trail, if we're on Marywood, if we're going to get possibly remove the parking on the one side of the street and put it in a bike lane, you mentioned we may not need a barrier. Are you thinking that we will just be paint for that, or would you? I mean, I've seen suggestions of those little armadillo kind of separators. Yeah. What do you like?
It's not that you don't need or want a barrier. It's just that barriers take room. The classic ugly Caltrans barrier is called a K-rail. It's basically a wall of concrete that needs absolute minimum 1 foot.
Right, yeah.
The other thing is a real barrier like that is going to create an end hazard. People can run into the barrier and crash the cars. There are flexible posts, though, that probably the city is already using in some context that are glued down with an adhesive base. That's one of the tools in the toolbox. Typically, if you put a path next to a street, you want some sort of an impact barrier. Mike and company are going to have to be creative in Lafayette because you only have a 36 foot wide street, at least 10, 10, 8, 8, yeah, 36 feet wide. That said, traffic behaves there pretty well. It's low to moderate speed traffic. Most of the people driving through there are residents. I think there's more of a shared expectation that we want to behave for the people that we know that are walking along the street. They're not strangers to the drivers. They are family members. They are neighbors. So when I look at that situation, I think, yeah, this has a chance of working without a formal barrier.
Great, thank you.
Vianney, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you very much, John. The thing is, have you looked at some of the streets or road away from downtown for cyclists in particular? Would you recommend putting signs of cycling on the roads or something to that effect, or share the road? That's the one.
We have only a limited availability to do focal areas for a report like this. It's not a comprehensive study of the entire city. But in the particular case of Share the Road, I want to respond to that as a bicycle designer. We thought it was a great accomplishment to get the Share the Road message into the MUTCD. But what's actually happened with it is that it turns out that it can be misinterpreted in several ways. To a courteous motorist, Share the Road means, oh, bicyclists are here, I better behave. To an impatient motorist, Share the Road means get out of my way. To a timid cyclist, it means I should get out of the way as much as possible, even if it endangers me in doing so. And to a experienced urban cyclist with an attitude, it might mean I'm going to get out there right in the middle of the lane. So it fails really as a traffic control device. Yeah. There are two other signs that might be considered by the city that have come into place since then. The Share the Road plaque is a yellow plaque with a black text. That's a warning sign color scheme. So it's a warning sign's purpose is to alert the traveling public of a condition that they might otherwise be aware of. The black and white signs are regulatory. They carry the force of law or they are reminders of law. And the two signs that I find more effective for certain situations where you might otherwise consider Share the Road signage are the R411 bikes may use full lane sign. And more recently, just in California, the pass bikes 3 feet minimum sign.
Yes.
That's actually in a lot of cases, especially in a partially rural, sort of rural became urban situation, like a lot of Lafayette streets. That's the behavior you really want is safe passing. So the pass bikes 3 foot min, which is I think the California R117 or R118, I forget the exact number. It's worth considering.
Yes, I've seen those in Arizona, actually. I was impressed. And so they had a sign, they had a bicycle and with the 3 feet and the narrow as well. And
back to Share the Road for just a minute. The Federal Highway Administration, in recognition of the fact that the sign has been found, the sign combination has been found to be ambiguous, is now discouraging its use in new applications.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So the 3 foot sign would be the best. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you.
Yeah, two things. Just one small point about the signage and the markings of bike lanes and K-rail and so on. I don't think we want to put something ugly in neighborhoods. The homes are lovely, the neighborhoods are lovely. It's relaxing to everyone to see beauty. That's trees, that's shrubbery, that's even street markings. To put K-rail in a lovely neighborhood and in front of blocks where you wouldn't want it yourself And of course, Oakland uses bright orange in some of their markings of their bike lanes. And I shudder to think that we might ever do anything like that here. It might be safer to throw up a whole bunch of blocks of plastic walls that look like K-rail and make biking safer, but I don't think it's a good trade-off. And then the other thing I wanted to ask Vianney and John a question. There was a day when the street markings that we have all over everywhere, we have the yellow, we have various different colors, green, a lot of green, and they were thermoplastic. Are these not thermoplastic? Thermoplastic for bicycles was regarded as very dangerous. And when I used to question use of thermoplastic for Lafayette, I was always told by the highway department and Caltrans and so on that thermoplastic created skidding problems for cyclists.
No, not true.
Is that true? And is this thermoplastic, or is it something that's non-skid?
Thermo itself can be slippery, but it's very straightforward for a civil engineer to make it not a problem. As a matter of fact, Palo Alto, which is highly regarded as one of the original bicycling towns, has a recipe that their public works department uses. They use a carefully calibrated glass bead, kind of glass gravel, and they mix it into the mix before they lay the thermoplastic. It's used by many other highway departments. So it's straightforward for your streets department or your contractors to pre-treat the thermoplastic in a way that makes it have acceptable traction for bicyclists. Lynn, I wanted to respond to something you said earlier. I agree that a neighborhood would be appalled to put, highway-style barriers and things like that. But I want to suggest that as you consider all the possibilities of creating something creative along Marywood, to distinguish between what I call the sort of the mid-block condition, which is what the path might look like between conflict points, such as the school driveway, and what it might look like at and crossing those conflict points. It might well be that it would be worth considering highlighting the fact that there is a two-way walking biking path across the school driveway, because it would be in a rather otherwise unexpected configuration. Some people would have never seen that. So putting conflict markings, for example, white stripes or green skip stripes or whatever, or something highly creative across conflict areas such as Sandalwood, such as the school driveway, and maybe not using such an intense marking away from those conflict points. That's a useful distinction.
Thank you.
Likewise, the application of the raised flexible delineators, probably not something you want along the entire parking lane, but possibly useful to highlight the conflict areas.
Okay. Greg, you had a question?
Yes. Thanks, Carl. John, I want to echo what others have said. The work and the report are excellent and very helpful, and we look forward to digging into them. I appreciate your clarification that these are suggestions rather than recommendations. I guess I did have a question for you in your experience, whether you've seen any successful strategies from various communities for getting these recommendations into implementation, and whether you have any thoughts or history that you could share with us on that.
The suggestions for Morocco Road are really dependent on traffic engineering. It's any practicality of a road diet or lane reduction is going to require an analysis and some creativity. That said, beginning with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say, if we have a strong desire line for people to cross that street, either to get to schools or to get between home and church, or in the last block by the Mount Diablo Boulevard, to cross between shopping areas, keep in mind the desire to give pedestrians the same kind of level of service as motorists. In the case of the neighborhood, I think it's going to come down to public process and not presenting the design. I'm kind of speaking out of school here, but if I were trying to get some improvement done in my own neighborhood here in San Francisco, I want to involve my neighbors and have them bring their concerns and get everything out on the table and make it a collaborative effort so that people can own and feel like they came up with the solution or they're comfortable with the solution. Mike knows how to do this. The traffic engineer has no doubt engineered good public process. It's going to be depending on bringing the collective brain power and desires of the city of Lafayette and citizens.
Thank you.
I'd like to just take a break for a moment and ask for public comment. We do have some people in the audience. I don't see any hands raised, but if anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, this would be your opportunity. And Jennifer, well, all three. So Therese, if you can take turns promoting them.
The first speaker is Jennifer Paul.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you very much for this report. It was wonderful. I had worked in 2013 on the Safe Route to School report, which you may have seen. And a few things I didn't see in the Spring Hill area that I just wanted to draw attention to and see if you had any ideas and had observed them. When you're looking on Pleasant Hill turning right onto Quant Road, so it's directly across from Spring Hill Elementary School, we saw that there's a lot of pedestrians there. A lot of kids are walking in that area, and it's a very tight corner for the bus to turn. There is cement on the sidewalk that's been broken up. And I did see, and I think it's wonderful to have a longer press button pedestrians. But I find, because I live right near there, that the kids that are walking, you can't see them when they go to cross because the people who are turning right onto Quant Road don't really stop. So if you have any suggestions for that area. And also I would just suggest to the entire committee, I think this slip lane, which you heard mentioned, I think is a huge issue, but also just crossing that entire street is an issue that we should just look at making it as visible as possible. So if there's any suggestions to be had, I would appreciate it.
I wanted to ask Jennifer if this right turn that you're speaking of is the northbound right
Correct.
turn onto Quant. Okay.
Correct.
So there's a dedicated right turn lane there.
Correct.
Right. And the issue with pedestrians not being seen, where does that occur?
That occurs when you are standing wanting to cross over Spring Hill Elementary, or perhaps you want to, crossing Pleasant Hill Road to get to Spring Hill. That area, because people are turning right, they kind of use it. They don't really stop. They just keep going.
I see.
So to make it as visible as possible, to let people know that, because if you do travel on that street, you'll see there's not a lot of signs even saying that there's a crosswalk or a school up ahead. Mm-hmm. So anything that you suggest to make it more visible that there are pedestrians, because pedestrians are crossing all the time, whether it's high school, adults are crossing, it's used quite often.
Right. For that particular right turn, Mike and the traffic engineer would have to vet this suggestion. It's uncommon for a right turn to be signalized with a red arrow, but that could be done at least at some times of the day, so that the right turn would be prohibited in the presence of pedestrians at some times of the day. I didn't think of that as a potential measure because it wasn't brought to my attention that particular movement was a particular conflict. But just looking at any right turn where you want to hold off the right turns, one tool to do that is a red arrow.
Okay, and I did have one other comment. The pedestrian, while I do believe the slip lane is one of the largest issues in this entire area. Standing on the island also makes pedestrians extremely vulnerable. And we've even recently had an accident there just a few weeks ago, but we've had a pretty bad accidents where cars have gone straight through and kept going, like they've hopped over that island. And you get a lot of school children there. So if there's anything to protect the island to make it more visible would be helpful.
One thing that I'm not sure if would stop a car from driving over, but I noticed, I believe that there was no left side pedestrian sign informing motorists approaching down the hill on Spring Hill that there was crosswalk ahead. The warning signs on the right side, and it may not be seen in its current position until you're already in the slip lane. I think just some field work by City of Lafayette staff will turn up a number of ideas there. And I do want to suggest that upstream speed hump as a possible element of a solution.
Thank you.
Lynn, do you have a question of Jennifer?
No, I have a comment on this location. I ran a public hearing on my 50th birthday until 1 o'clock in the morning for that neighborhood. We had a few hundred people in that room. The promise was, because we had a boy hit there, the promise was from that neighborhood that if we didn't put in a stop sign, they would forever be good people and they would be very careful crawling through there. And they're obviously not doing that. So I don't see why we can't put a stop sign there. And I think we should. They've had all this time. They have become very sloppy, obviously, or we wouldn't be having this problem.
Okay. Thank you for that reminder, and we'll have the team add that to their things to look into. Anything else for Jennifer? Okay. Would you, Therese, would you bring in Megan then?
Yeah. Megan Mittman is the next speaker.
Right.
Hi, Megan.
Everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Megan Mittman, resident in front of Burton Valley Elementary. And thank you, John. I appreciate the acknowledgement. I did have a chance to peer review and to take a look at this. Also was one of the authors of the program years and years ago. So really, really excited to have this come to Lafayette. Just wanted to express my appreciation to the city for doing this, and in particular to having the subgroups, the sub areas by each school to take a look at it. I really think the idea of doing the quick build that Mayor Kandel is looking for, to try to identify one per school or a series of those per school to get them in right away. I know a meeting earlier tonight was just on returning even more kids back to school with more days per week, which is fantastic. But we really, the sense of urgency. And then just the one other thing I'd like to mention, we've been talking a lot about the projects, but the whole front of the report talks about ways to institutionalize safety into programs, practices, and policies. And I think a great way to do that will be the local road safety plan. And I would really just urge us to be looking at a Vision Zero action plan as a way to do that. So those are my comments. Thank you again.
Oh, hold on, Megan. So go back to those two suggestions, the Vision Zero action plan. What was the one before that?
I think I was just mentioning the benchmarking assessment, which is the kind of the front chapter. Often in these reports, everybody focuses on the projects, which is amazing and which is great. They're the reactive, kind of in response to concerns, whereas the benchmarking we really envisioned is the proactive way to get out ahead and to institutionalize safety into everything that's happening in the city. So just wanting to point out that don't skip through that front part of it. There's a lot of great things in there too, and things that are, can live beyond just the current projects too.
I think the specific tool that or process that Megan mentioned earlier was the Local Road Safety Plan, LRSP.
Oh yes, the city has funding for that. And so my suggestion is to use that funding to do a Vision Zero action plan. And that would be consistent with what the benchmarking is recommending.
Great. Any questions for Megan?
When reading the benchmarking section, which is chapter 3 in the report, there's a large table, and it basically assesses the city's position on a whole long list of items that get into quite a bit of specificity as to whether the city's sort of at the state of the practice, or sort of in normal practice, or needs to do some catch-up work. So that's the structure of that table.
Any other questions for Megan? Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you so much.
All right. And one more.
Next speaker is Mirabel.
Maribel, you need to unmute yourself, maybe?
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I'm not Mirabel. I'm just on her computer. This is Adele.
Oh, hi there.
Hi there. Thanks for the for going over all those details and the study of the report. I didn't hear all of it. I came in a little bit late, but a lot of what I heard, most of you know that I did a 21-page report a long time ago when you were at the city was asking for traffic reduction for the congestion problems. And one of my projects, which I guess you're calling a raised sidewalk, mine was a footbridge across Morocco Road. That is on the long-term strategy list. In 2015 or 16, it cost $60,000 to put it up. That's what I had quoted from a firm that makes wooden footbridges in Florida. But today they said it would cost $1 million to put it up. Still not that high for the cost of saving potential lives at that crazy intersection crossing Moraga. But I wanted to say that I have made a report that's a little more brief. It's not a 21-page all on one subject and then the second subject being all the Band-Aid, the low-hanging fruit, but it's one page of all of the low-hanging fruit and then just one page of the footbridge. So I'd like to send that over. A lot of what was said tonight overlaps my solutions. And also there were some areas that definitely were not covered that I have in mind. So if I could send that over, who would I send that to? To Suzanne?
Send that to, please send that to Therese, and her email address is on the website, and then she will distribute it to staff and the commissioners.
Okay, so I have to send to one person, not two? Can I send it to two different people?
Well, you can include Mike if you want, or Mike, me.
Okay, Carl. And then also, can I have the name of the person who just did this report or the company? His name was John?
Yes. I'm John Ciccarelli. My last name's not displayed. I'm with a program at UC Berkeley called SafeTrack, SafeTrack. Okay, yeah. I've seen the trucks driving around.
Yeah. So Adele, if you you go into the calendar, the agenda item for today, this report is attached to the agenda.
Okay, sure. All right, great, excellent. And I know you guys said you're making a subcommittees, which I've already been on one for the with Susan and Teresa. I forget what it was called, but it was for the traffic and highlighting some things. I especially work on the Morocco Road corridor, the whole corridor in the downtown, but I also stretch all the ways from Pleasant Hill to Acalanes Road, complete street with the safest routes connecting to the downtown bypasses. And so I have lots of maps, and that's my passion, to get everybody safe, as well as minimizing traffic drastically, especially on Morocco Road, where it's a mess. Before the schools get back in session, hopefully, we could take care of some of these small, low-hanging fruits and that are easily implemented, a weekend project. But it's also a snowball effect, so a lot of them have to be done at once. So I'll send that over. Thank you.
Yeah, That would be great. Any questions for Adele?
Yeah.
Dick?
Yeah, thank Carl. Adele, this to Craig. You spoke about a year and a half ago, I think, at a commission meeting, and I still have your low-hanging fruit document. Are you talking about the same thing, or have you updated it significantly since then?
I may have left off a few things and added on a few more things. The one I was going to send over today just has, there's definitely some items on there. There's about 20 items on there.
And while we haven't gotten
more that I could, go ahead.
Okay, well, we haven't gotten to this point yet. Hopefully I'll be with the Lafayette Elementary and Stanley area subcommittee, and would welcome from my standpoint, would welcome your involvement with that committee. So
Thank you. I would love to help you out there and be on that. I know Mike walked with me on Morocco Road at one point and changed one of the things that was on.
Yeah, I think we'll having the most direct impact with Morocco Road.
Yeah, we haven't worked out the mechanisms yet, Adele, but we're going to publicize how to get community members, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved. So, but we'll keep you in mind.
Okay, well, if I'm in mind and nowhere else, then at least you have my papers, and I will send them in. And I know you said you're going to be going through the files that you already have. So thanks for going through mine, and I'm going to send an updated or just a shorter version of it, so it'll be easier to get.
On the specific topic of public input, especially from folks that may not have spent time attending committees and such like that, I wanted to put in a plug for another Berkeley SafeTrack tool called Street Story. Street Story is a map-based crowdsourcing public input tool, and it could be used by any agency to collect input by basically touching a map and telling where it hurts.
Yeah, I saw that in your report, and I'm looking forward to exploring that. Okay. Let's bring the discussion back to the commission members. I want to just ask a few quick questions, and then we have to move on. So this is messages for John. Anybody else can chime in. Was there any findings when you did the study? Were there any findings that kind of surprised you?
Findings that surprised me.
As in things that maybe you thought that we would have done, but they're not, or things that are like obvious, but we haven't implemented them. Anything of that nature?
Frankly, let me think through. I'll take the three locations in succession. Morocco Road's a tough nut. It's a high traffic street with 4 lanes and no center turn lane and no bike lanes, although it sounds like there were historical bike lanes. That's just a tough traffic analysis problem. I did what I could to shine a light on some best practices for that street and some possibilities, but they really are going to need a traffic analysis. School Street is a creativity thing and what the neighborhood would like to achieve for bicycling and walking and getting to and from school, as well as what they're willing to yield, especially the people who have parking along their sidewalk. I think there's some real creative solutions lurking in there. And I hope that what I came up with the assistance of Megan, by the way, some things that went beyond when she did the peer review. So he said, have you thought of this? Oh, that's neat. Let me develop that a little bit further. For Acalanes and Spring Hill was pretty straightforward stuff, including the slip lane. I think that there's great potential for improving it in an incremental fashion. For getting to and from Acalanes, I know there's a citizen group that has come up with an innovative concept of putting a median bikeway under the Highway 24 interchange. I looked at that, and I've actually seen some median bikeways. The devil's in the details, including how you get back and forth from the endpoints. Case in point is US 101 in San Mateo, the Third Street interchange has a median bike path. But there's another way to get people through there with something like a separated path without the full separation, but also not requiring the the endpoint creativity of the two signals, and that would be to put a path along the east side across the freeway ramps from Mount Diablo Boulevard up to Deer Hill. So take a look at the report for that. That wasn't a surprise so much as exercise in creativity. For Burton Valley, I want to again thank Megan for urging me not to hold back on certain elements of solution that I might have thought might have been politically infeasible, such as the notion of parking removal. You know, it can be a touchy subject. But I really think that to get to the solution that's going to tie in the trail and really do a good job for getting people to and from school on Marywood, that's got to be on the table. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's good. I just was looking for highlights and ideas. And that ties into the last question I'll ask is, we're going to be creating a subcommittee that will have different teams, and these teams will be doing walkthroughs in specific areas around the different schools. Do you have any tips you might share with us on how to make walkthroughs more productive, or things, you know, approaches them, how to approach those?
There's a large body of best practice for conducting walking audits, and I would refer you to the Safe Routes to Schools literature. They have really systematized it. I think UC Berkeley can provide resources on that too. But start with the Safe Routes to Schools and also the Vision Zero efforts, and they're good resources. If you make a specific request, I can probably chase down some specific publications, but they're not hard to find in the literature. That was actually something that I wish we could have conducted, but with the pandemic year, we usually do essentially a walk audit. We invite people to go along on the one day that we're in town, and it's very productive. I often hear things that I would never thought of. Oh, that works that way. Oh, that's happening here. You know, this is why we call our suggestions instead of recommendations. We don't have the full benefit of everyone that lives in the community and interacts with the traffic on a daily basis. So I encourage you to get a broad participation on your walking audits.
Great. Okay. Any other questions for John? I want to reiterate what the other commissioners said, and I very much appreciate this report. It has so much meat in it, and it's really got a lot of things that I think we're going to be able to dig into and get some applications, or I would say implement some great things. So I really appreciate you spending the time doing this report as well as joining us tonight. It's been very helpful.
Thank you. I feel privileged to have worked with this program for 20 years under various acronyms. And it's sometimes towards the end of the season when we're cranking out the draft finals, it's arduous, but looking back on it, I always think, wow, I get paid to do this. This is okay.
All right. So so I think at this point, we're going to go to under the staff report. There was two recommendations. And I don't know if you want to stick around, John. If not, you're welcome to leave. But second part has to do with what are we going to do, next steps. And so needless to say, I haven't really got to that point on how we're going to organize field teams and so forth. And also reaching out. We had presented the work plan to the city council, as you all know. And I think that the process that's laid out seemed to be pretty good. I need to work on getting that process up on the website. We need to reach out and identify the stakeholders and so forth. And I'm wondering whether we should be doing this by emails rather than waiting for the next meeting. Mike, when is our next meeting? Do you know offhand? Is it the week of March?
I believe that for April, we're planning on 2 meetings. At least that's the intent, right? And based on the polling of the commission Our standard meetings are probably going to be the first and third Wednesdays, as opposed to the previous Monday, because we had that conflict with Planning Commission and even sometimes with CPAC if it floated to a Tuesday. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know those calendar dates off the top of my head, but basically the first and third Wednesdays.
Yeah, it'd be the 7th.
April 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is what we're going to need to do, because we don't want to wait till April 7th to actually exchange information. I will work with Mike and staff I want to put up a mechanism for having our project materials on a website, on the city website, and some other things. And then I think what we'll do is I'll start sending out emails. I know I want to contact Mr. Whitmore, and I think rather than have everybody reach out to the same people, I'll send out a detailed note next week on what I think the next step should be and how we can divvy up items. Okay. So Stella, did you have something to say?
I was just going to say that just be cognizant that the school district is going through I don't know what you call it, regenerating itself for the third time or something like that now. There was just a board meeting, a special board meeting today, and they have a lot of work that they're going to be embarking on to change it sounds like the elementary school schedules. And so just be cognizant that Superintendent Whitmore is in a million places right now.
Yeah.
And I know that he did also say at one of the last city schools, I believe council subcommittees meetings, that he definitely wants to be a part of any of this process and walkthroughs in particular. So hopefully there'll be a way to balance all of the priorities.
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll be.
Carl, if I could just add, this is Mike. And same with Superintendent Nickerson, right? For High School in this case, they're going to be so busy. But also, I think that even they will rely on, members of their population, whether it's PTA or other stakeholders to be a part of that process, right? At that same meeting still, I think we had even a volunteer representing the high school district to say, definitely keep me included. Lynn's mentioned we need the PTA and the people that have worked on these other reports and so forth. So I think it's really important that we sort of advertise and make sure we can include as many of these different people that have been involved and want to be involved now. Recognizing that not probably everyone could make everything, but I think it's very important that there's some inclusion here, because you're going to get that specific experience of this is the close call I saw, and that may change exactly where a sign or a speed hump or something else goes, right? You're going to have that intimate experience, and that's real important. That's what we want. And John's mentioned that through his report tonight, that you want to make sure that you have, the best information so that you're placing these elements at the best locations to do the most good.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. I do remember that person, I think, was actually a board member from the Acalanes Union District. But thanks for that reminder. I made a list of stakeholders and I forgot to put down the LAFSD board.
Okay. Okay, so for the other commissioners, let's see. Any feedback on or any thoughts on what we've discussed tonight or next steps, Dick?
I guess, so we have an idea. I mean, the school administration, PTAs, I think your earlier message, HOAs, I mean, neighbors certainly are going to be critical. Are you envisioning publicizing this and then asking people to volunteer, or should we be looking to reach out ourselves to say the HOA? Or on the one hand, I don't want to get flooded with dozens of people say, I mean, we want to keep it from getting unwieldy. So what's the thought process? How you see reaching out to some of the rest of the stakeholders?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was going to ask all the commissioners to kind of develop, as Stella said, develop the list of people in the respective areas, and then we should exchange those and decide how to contact them so that they don't have overlap.
Okay.
I hadn't gone beyond that.
Okay.
May I suggest something?
Yeah.
I think it should come from the city itself in order to make it more real. Otherwise, if it comes from us, it may not have the same weight to reach all these various groups.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bid everybody good night. I'm going to leave my screen on share. I have a walk audit resource on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that link, but if you could take it off, then we can see each other again.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I was.
Oh, there we go.
Lynn, you had a question, comment?
Yes, I would encourage us to work with the PTAs and the parents clubs. Every school has one, and they are the ones who know. And I don't think we should be doing this without working carefully with them.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask another sort of question? Is there any reason why we couldn't proceed with some of those tiger teeth or lines, whatever you want to use, before you get to a crosswalk? I almost killed a woman in Walnut Creek maybe a year or two ago. If my husband hadn't shouted, it was on North California Boulevard. They were the little tiger teeth, and I pulled up to the tiger teeth and I stopped, and there was a big truck on my right. And this girl materialized right in front of my bumper from the truck that was very close to my car. And my husband shouted, "Lynn, stop," boom. And I slammed on the brakes and I missed her by about that much, a couple of inches.
Can I ask again the question that is, do we, us as commissioners, contact the various school principals, or should that be coming from the city itself?
So I could just offer that can certainly come through staff. I think, Carl, you just mentioned, Chair DeGiorgio, putting together stakeholders lists. And the only other one I'd add from the ones we've seen is, there have been several people like Adele and Megan and Jennifer tonight who have been involved in following our TransCirc, and almost all of them in public comment have said, "Hey, I want to be involved, keep me in mind." We have a list of those people, from our minutes. I don't want to miss any of them. I want to give them the opportunities to be stakeholders. That they've already kind of been stakeholders with pushes in the past, and they've all shared that they want to be involved. So certainly we want to include them.
Yes, I understand that. But in order to contact the various schools, principals, and so forth, where does that come from?
Well, let's start by just gathering the ideas on who we're going to contact.
No, I understand, but
I to your point, yes. But I think that if we send out a letter, yeah, we certainly can have staff help us send out letters.
Okay.
We can also send out we can have a general letter from staff explaining how they would request assistance in this project, and then we can tailor the letter to the individual.
No, I understand that. Okay.
It can come from the city council too.
Yeah.
Or we could even contact the newspapers.
Yeah. So let's regroup on next steps. I will send out to everybody the process document that we had gone through with the city council. And then we'll ask everybody to look at their areas and develop the stakeholder lists. And then we'll figure out the mechanism, but I think the easiest thing is going to be to sending it to me and Mike, and we'll assemble those lists. And then also for your specific areas that you've volunteered for, I know that some of you have already been going through like the SafeTrack report, and there's also the Safe Routes to Schools reports. It's time to start going through those reports and thinking about what are we going to be looking for when we go out and do walkthroughs later on. And then we'll also have to identify, as Mike said, community members that want to be involved. So I think that's going to take a week or at least a week to get that going. Susan, do you have any process recommendations or anything you think we should be doing?
No, I think that's right. Coming from staff, I think it's probably staff plus Carl makes sense. A central location, especially if you're contacting the same people. You guys had dates, and so include definitely the target dates. We want to get a meeting blank, but then find out maybe from each group what time of day works best for their group, the people on your commission, right? And have those kind of in that letter, maybe, to kind of give some guidelines, just to make it a one-stop shop for a guy like Richard Whitmore.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. Thank you for that. All right. Any other comments or ideas? All right, let's close this item. It's getting late, 9 o'clock. I want to go to commissioner and staff reports and show to, Susan.
I'm going to go. All right. I'm gonna go.
Thank you very much for attending tonight.
I learned a lot. So thank you guys. Bye.
All right. Mike, did you want to share anything going on, or Sia?
I don't think I have anything new to add necessarily. I think we've all taken in a lot so far. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And any commissioners want to share anything that's been going on?
Well, just briefly on the GPAC, we had last night a briefing on all the housing bills proposed in the state legislature. There's a lot of them. They could have bearing on where we're going. If you're interested, you can go to the GPAC website. I think it should be there. It was certainly from the meeting notice. And there's a recap of the various SBs and what they're trying to do. Probably something people are going to want to start paying some attention to as the stuff goes forward. It could change the arena allocations eventually, but in the meantime, we have to continue on the path we're on.
Yeah.
So that's a.
I want to highlight that tomorrow night, I had on my calendar, I haven't verified that it's still on, was going to be the Housing Element 101 for the Release Valley Road area. And so I know I have to send out a note to my neighbors about that.
Yeah.
It'll
be somewhat similar to our session, although it's been evolving and improving upon. So you might get a better version than.
Right. So if any commissioners hear anybody expressing questions about the whole process, the GPAC process, you can point out to them the meeting tomorrow. All right.
Is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, it starts at 6 though.
Yeah.
So,
6. We've got a homeowners council board meeting tomorrow night.
Right. So I won't say the whole thing. Okay. Anything else, everybody? Anybody?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Megan Mittens mentioned the local road safety plan a couple times in her public comment at various meetings. And she's mentioned a suggestion to create a Vision Zero action plan. So I just took a look at the internet and I see that indeed for this year, March 12th, it says, it's the update, Lafayette has received $80,000, well, $72,000 in LRSP funds with an $8,000 local match. And I'm just wondering kind of process-wise, what's the current thinking for how that will be used? And what would the process be for the decision-making?
So Stella, that is to be used for a local roadway safety plan. And to be honest, C and I have had this discussion. It's on his short list that's pretty long of items to get the request for proposal out. Okay. And Megan has also mentioned, using this as our Vision Zero plan. And it's not 100% clear to me, and she would know more about it than me, if these are two separate plans or if one can serve as both. I always thought that it would be the LRSP and it would have a Vision Zero component, and that would qualify as like your Vision Zero plan. You know, it doesn't have to be a 1,000-page report. It can, you know, like this SafeTrack report, it was not 1,000 pages, but it has a lot of information. Vision Zero can be the same way because it's not looking at every specific location. It's coming up with just general themes that you would implement everywhere you can. So it also, by the way, Vision Zero also focuses on your main corridors where accidents are the worst. So it's a focused look as well. So it's both. And I think that plan is it's going to help us get towards a Vision Zero goal, no matter what. I think there's some details on even for our request for proposal on how we want to word it, and if there's different types of documents. The concern is that you do an LRSP and then you do a separate Vision Zero plan that we don't have funded. We did get $72,000 with $8,000 of match funding for this from the state, and you have to have one completed or you will not qualify for HSIP funding, which is like a highway safety improvement project funding. Quite honestly, we're not a great candidate for any of those grants ever anyway, but nonetheless, it's a good tool to have, and we were able to take advantage of the funding, you know, from the state to get this plan done. So that's still going to happen. You know, Sia knows it's on his list. I know it's on his list. Justin started it, and that's how long it's been on the list. So.
Okay, but just so I understand then, so it sounds like it would be an RFP to a consultant that would develop the local road safety plan?
That's correct. Yes, that's not going to be in-house. That will be a consultant that's done these, has experience in these, knows what goes in them, which includes process as well. It will likely include utilizing at least one, if not more, meetings of Transportation and Circulation Commission as a public forum for input on it, just like we would have, you know, for other plans, right? So it's somebody to basically walk us through the process and write the report and put in the data. It will include traffic analysis. It will include safety records, accident analysis, and so forth. So.
Okay, and last question, has the city ever written one of these plans before, or is this a new thing?
No, this is new for us, but you could say that, I mean, honestly, some of it will overlap with the SafeTrack report that we just put out, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. We're all trying to get safer for multi-purpose use.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, well, thank you everybody for your time. Thanks, Mike, for the, I know this report was a long time in the works, and I appreciate you helping him out with it. I thought it was a great report. So I guess it's 9:05. I'm gonna say this meeting's over, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.
Come on now.